Ladies and gentlemen! MEGADETH!
Well, hello, my friends. We meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? When I was just a wee lad, around 10 years old, I was eating breakfast at the table before school, and on the kitchen TV, it was playing cartoons. You know, as it normally does. This was on Teletoon for all those Canadian boys who remember. I was watching a show called Duck Dodgers when all of a sudden I heard this tremendous noise coming from the TV, and that noise was Megadeth defending Earth from enslavement. In what must have been some of my first experiences to metal music ever, I was completely entranced, and this was all happening in one of my favorite television cartoon shows. So let us take a look at the most ambitious cartoon crossover that was ever put on television: Megadeth versus Duck Dodgers. Now, Duck Dodgers was part of this early 2000s renaissance of classic 60s and 70s cartoons, which I'm not going to get into in this video, but essentially, the Duck Dodgers show took the concept from the Looney Tunes classic short, which had the same name, Duck Dodgers. Here it took this sort of futuristic space idea and fleshed it out into a complete standalone series. So in the series here, we see Daffy Duck be repurposed as Duck Dodgers, which is a space captain of Earth's defense fleet, blah blah blah. Porky Pig is his sidekick as the eager young space cadet, and of course we cannot forget Marvin the Martian, who is part of the Martian Empire. He serves his queen faithfully and essentially serves as Duck Dodger's foil and main antagonist throughout the series. The episodes usually revolve around the Martians' attempt to subjugate Earth, with the unlikely hero Duck Dodgers managing to thwart them with incompetence, luck, and sometimes some very, very competent and brave actions on his part, of course with a lot of help from Porky Pig. I remember liking the show quite a bit when I was younger, and honestly, anything to do with Porky Pig in it, I will love. I just find him hilarious. His stuttering. I love Porky Pig. And just a side note, the theme song for the show is an absolute 10 out of 10 banger, sung by Tom Jones and arranged by the Flaming Lips. It is just, wow.
Duck Dodgers of the 24th and 1/2 century.
So then, how did Megadeth and Dave Mustaine manage to become involved in all of this? I asked the head writer of the show, Mark Banker, for comment, but unsurprisingly, no response. No worries. But, however, if you look at his Twitter bio, the man says that he is a hair metal enthusiast. So, trying to imagine 20-some years ago, I imagine that Mark Banker was well aware of Megadeth, and maybe he was even a huge Megadeth fan, which, going by some of the things that are mentioned in the episode, it is not too far of a stretch to say that at all. And we'll get to the episode here shortly, I promise. Just a little bit more backstory before we get into that. In a tweet from Dave Mustaine in 2016, he replied to a person mentioning the show, saying that he, quote, "I did it for my kids at the time. I wish more dads would put their kids first more often," end quote. Which, first of all, you know, big time wholesome Chungus moment tweet from Dave Mustaine here. He sounds like a great dad. And secondly, it sounds like he was almost somewhat embarrassed. Maybe he did the show somewhat reluctantly. These two little tidbits of information is pretty much all I was able to find online regarding how this episode came to be. So then, here is my headcanon of the events. Sometime in early 2004 or maybe 2003, I assume Dave Mustaine received a call from his management team about a cartoon show looking to feature a rock star or metal musician for an episode. I would guess most of the episode before the Megadeth specific parts had already been written. Dave Mustaine would reply with, "Duck Dodgers? Never heard of it." So he puts his phone down and asks his kids, who maybe were around him watching TV or something like that, and asks them, "Have you guys ever heard of a show called Duck Dodgers?" And now Dave Mustaine's kids are pretty much right around my age. I was born in 94, but you know, we can assume they were watching the same sort of television I was. I was in Canada, they were in the States, but you know, the programming was more or less the same, of course, right? So then his kids, you know, who probably were well aware of Duck Dodgers, all replied with an enthusiastic yes, or something like that. So he says, "Well, okay." And then after some talks and negotiations with his manager and the producing team at the Duck Dodgers show about payment, blah, 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 he then agrees to do the show. Now you might ask, Varvis, why Megadeth? Why not any of these other bands? Why not Metallica? Why not Iron Maiden? Why not Motley Crue or even Motorhead? Well, and as a huge Megadeth fanboy, this kind of hurts me to say, but in 2004, before The System Has Failed had come out, Megadeth's stock price was at an all-time low. The late 90s and early 2000s was not a great time for the band, nor was it really a great time for the sort of more traditional metal bands, I guess you could say, right? Megadeth's album before this, The World Needs a Hero, had sold even less copies than Risk, which at that time was the worst-selling Megadeth record since their debut. You know, the band had essentially completely broken up following the World Needs a Hero tour, with Dave Mustaine needing surgery on his arm to even be able to play guitar again. Thus, the period of time from about 2001 to late 2004 is almost certainly the lowest point in Megadeth's sort of cultural relevance, you know, probably ever, honestly. In fact, it was just a terrible time for most of the old school metal bands who found themselves completely overshadowed by newer nu metal and post-grunge acts. This is also before the resurgence of popularity that would come near the end of 2000s that these bands would see as well. You know, the sort of old school metal revival and nostalgia of it all, right? It wasn't old enough to be nostalgic yet. It was sort of in that mid sort of, you know, cringe period, I guess you could say, of time, right? It's sick, then it's cringe, and it's cringe, then nostalgia comes, and it's cool again, you know what I mean? So essentially this was in the lowest stock price of Megadeth's career, right? Thus, to the producers of the show, and this is extremely, extremely important, Megadeth was a band which still had name recognition, but because of the drastic decline in popularity, as well as the band essentially not really existing at all at the time, it would not be too expensive to acquire the rights to the music. Essentially, Megadeth being at the bottom of the barrel, relevance-wise, was the perfect fit for this episode. Thus, the episode in question is from the third season of the show and aired on November 4th, 2005. The episode is entitled, "In Space, No One Can Hear You Rock," which is a reference to the 1979 Alien movie. You know, in space, no one can hear you scream. The general plot of this episode is that the Martians are attempting to conquer, or I guess, annoy Earth into subjugation by replacing all music with slow jazz.
My bathroom sounds like a bathroom in an elevator. Captain, something's wrong with my stereo, and we're out of hot water.
And this is honestly a pretty hilarious concept if you think about it, and I did find it extremely humorous that Duck Dodgers himself would still be listening to thrash metal in the 23rd and one-half century. And not only that, but thrash metal seems to be his choice of music in the shower. The song he's listening to in the shower sounds familiar, but I'm pretty sure this is not any Megadeth song.
With my tubes.
So yeah, if anyone has any clue what song this is, please let me know down in the comments. And while you are doing that, consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It really helps to show the almighty algorithm that people like my stuff, and it'll show it to more people, essentially. Thank you. I also have a playlist full of other videos on Megadeth. I got a ton of them, so make sure you go check out some of those after this video is done. Really appreciate you guys, so thank you so much. We're getting close to 20,000 subscribers and that last grind, so yeah, let's keep it up, guys. Let's do it. So after all the various Earthling characters are alerted to this mass replacement of Earthling music with Martian smooth jazz, it is revealed to be all part of the master plan by which the Martians, who are using their secret weapon, the Sax Oblivion, which functions as a, quote, invincible audio energy siphon, end quote. Sax Oblivion is honestly a hilarious name, and I am somewhat saddened that we never got a prog metal band named this, you know, featuring a saxophone. Someone make it happen. And now let's think about this for a second. Think about the scenario. If a warring civilization were to simply replace all human music with something else, I don't know, you know, what would aliens even listen to? Or what type of music do people really hate? Ah, right. Corporate ukulele, xylophone, advertising slop, or what I like to succinctly call 30-second unskippable ad core. So if somehow they were able to replace all music with this tripe, I actually think humanity would capitulate in like less than 2 days. No one could stand being forced to listen to that 30-second unskippable ad core for more than a day. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible music, right? However, in this universe, the Earthlings are able to fight back. And in this case, they are looking to overpower the audio energy siphon with the loudest sound known to man. And to quote the show, no one rocked louder, harder, or faster than Dave Mustaine. And so somehow Duck Dodgers has a poster of Megadeth taped to the windows of his spaceship, which is a pretty funny, hilarious visual gag. and it's kind of funny to think about. Duck Dodgers states that, quote, back in the day, he put the heavy in heavy metal, end quote. Little subtle foreshadowing there. Essentially, the plan of the show here is to overwhelm the Sax Oblivion's energy siphons with pure heavy metal, which first of all is based as fuck, and secondly, for this purpose, Megadeth is actually a great choice. It makes sense to use the band that was billed as the world's state-of-the-art speed metal band for this purpose. However, to do so, Dave Mustaine, who has been long dead and is preserved in the Rock and Roll History Museum, must be revived and thawed first. And here is where it is revealed to us that the writers of the show were probably secretly huge Megadeth fans. Not only does Duck Dodgers reference Megadeth, like, you know, everybody should know who they are, but here the writers also placed Dave Mustaine in the Rock and Roll History Museum next to Paul McCartney, Madonna, and Jim Morrison. Now, you know, of course, Megadeth is one of the biggest metal bands probably ever, but having next to Jim Morrison and Paul McCartney and Madonna in the Rock and Roll History Museum, like, that is huge, huge praise. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Dave Mustaine even did the show. They're like, yeah, we'll put you next to Paul McCartney. He's like, all right, sick. I don't know. But yeah, to have him placed next to these three in a museum is huge praise. I also like he was frozen in all of his stage clothes at like right around 35 years old. Pretty funny. Thus, they stuff his frozen body in a microwave, which is honestly another very funny visual gag. Here he is thawed, and because of this thawing, he essentially has lost all his memory. Like he's a burrito still frozen inside. He does not even remember who he is. They drew Dave Mustaine very flatteringly here, and of course, not that Dave Mustaine is a bad-looking guy by any stretch of the imagination, but here he is looking almost like Giga Chad himself. Giga Chad Dave Mustaine. Thus, the crew attempt to re-educate Dave Mustaine on how to rock. They play for him a recording of what looks to be a VH1 behind the music, and although they totally make fun of it, with the narrator saying that he was raised by wolverines and other such exaggerations and hyperbolic statements, with Dave Mustaine, you know, disagreeing with the narrator in between.
Genetically engineered in a lab and raised by wolverines.
I wasn't genetically engineered in a lab or raised by wolverines.
It's a pretty funny gag, and one that pokes fun at the way, if you watch those old behind the music things, they're very, you know, exclamatory and hyperbolic, like I said before. So it's kind of funny that the writers saw that and included that in the show. So Dave Mustaine still doesn't know who he is, and they only have about an hour of time left before they are all turned into Martian slaves listening to smooth jazz. So Duck Dodgers takes command and takes Porky Pig, Dr. IQ High, and Dave Mustaine to rock school. The image of all three of them sitting in desks here is pretty hilarious, and Duck Dodgers makes a pretty funny statement. Quote, if you're on stage and you don't know where you are, just say, thank you, Detroit, and you have a 47% chance of being right, end quote. That, honestly, when I watched it again for the first time in a long time, I laughed out loud at that. That was pretty funny. And honestly, it sounds like a Kiss reference here to me as well. On the board behind him is a 3-step process to rocking. Step 1 being to have hair and lots of it. Step 2, have more hair. And then step 3 is, I guess, play the instruments. The whole classroom scene here is really funny. I actually recommend going and watching this. And seeing Porky Pig holding that Thunderbird bass is just pure comedy. We also get to see Dave Mustaine holding his signature ESP Flying V here, which is cool. And one last thing to mention here is that for some reason, I just have a very distinct memory of this line for whatever reason.
Chilean Chupacabra!
And honestly, guys, like, I have no idea why I remember Chilean Chupacabra and why it stuck with me for so long. But the thought of Dave Mustaine in a voice actor's booth yelling out, Chilean Chupacabra! is just such a hilarious mental image. Like, I wonder how many takes they had to do. You know, he read the line, Chilean Chupacabra. No, Dave, we gotta do it again with more oomph. Thus, the stage is then set. Earth sends out its last line of defense to stop the Martians and the Sax Oblivion. A floating stage spaceship with the band MEGADETH as their only saving hope for Earth to avoid serfdom. This image here, man, it is just burnt into my head. Porky Pig with the Thunderbird bass, Dr. IQ High on the drums, Duck Dodgers looking like Alex Lifeson with that double neck SG out of exit stage left, and of course, Dave Mustaine standing there just looking bewildered and completely out of place. Of course, though, Megaduck is not the band playing, and shortly after Duck Dodgers destroys all his guitar strings trying to play a guitar solo, Dave Mustaine's memory is healed. All it took was the loud sounds of screeching guitars and feedback and being on stage holding his guitar, blah, blah, blah. And it all comes back to him. And like you heard in the intro of this video, we get probably the best intro a band could ever hope for, with Porky Pig stuttering out the word Megadeth.
Ladies and gentlemen, Megadeth!
Now I remember.
And thus, apparently, Dr. IQ High somehow revived and, you know, revived the other members of Megadeth, who are somehow thawed and then teleported onto stage. I have a hard time believing that Sean and Glenn Drover were kept in the Rock and Roll History Museum, but, you know, I don't know. Who knows? I also assume that the bassist here is James McDonough, as Dave Ellison was not in the band at the time, so I think that's the lineup here that's on stage. So then Megadeth gets up on stage and plays a show, and they just rock the house down, and the song that they play here is actually Back in the Day off The System Has Failed. So then to sum it up, the music is just so powerful and rocks too hard and is way too loud, and in addition to having a laser gun installed onto his black ESP-V, they completely overwhelm and blow up the Sax Oblivion in true stylistic fashion. I love how the Martian Centurions are cheering along with it, and to use a pro wrestling term here, the show really puts Megadeth over in a big way. You know, the band really appears larger and louder than life, and a really big deal, which is pretty cool. And the animation here, though, I have to say, is just absolutely horrendous. Only the vocals are even close to being synced up with the music, and, you know, I can forgive guitars and basses, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the animators weren't, you know, or musicians at all, but to not even line up the drums, like, man, come on. Like, did none of you nerds ever take a band class at all? Like, come on, man. Okay, but you know what? Forget that. What about the song choice here? Back in the Day was off The System Has Failed, so that really only makes sense that Dave would want a song off his new album to be featured in the show. A way to cross-pollinate audiences, so to speak. Now, if you were able to choose any of the Megadeth songs from their catalog up until this point, you probably would have chosen Symphony Destruction for this. It's by far their most well-known song, as well as sort of fitting in thematically with the episode. You know, Sax Oblivion, Symphony Destruction, right? It just kind of works. However, in addition to Dave Mustaine wanting to promote something from the new album, Symphony Destruction probably would have also cost a lot more money to acquire the usage rights to use it. So then, Back in the Day it is. But was this the best song of The System Has Failed for the show? Well, you know, looking through the album here, the only other song that really comes close to the energy and sort of epic, triumphant feeling which Back in the Day gives is Blackmail the Universe.
Blackmail the universe with the greatest of calamities. Awaken.
And Kick the Chair.
Kick the chair. The rope's tight just like one quick wrench. The truth is
These three songs here are pretty much the hardest metal songs on the album. But, you know, you wouldn't really want a song about the president being blown up in nuclear war in a children's show. And honestly, I shouldn't even have to get into why Kick the Chair was not chosen. So yeah, interestingly enough, they chose Back in the Day, which didn't even get a music video in real life, although I think it's probably like the best song of the album, so it probably should have gotten a music video. And maybe they were wanting to do something at the TV show for the music video, and it just never really panned out. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of strange. But yeah, it's one of my favorite songs of the album. I really like the song. And thematically, Back in the Day also works very well here. Plenty of good riffs with a very upbeat and energetic feeling, along with a very nice triumphant, you know, climax at the end, which is important as the show ends during that climax, you know, blowing up the Martian fleet, and Megadeth's sonic energy is overwhelming the Sax Oblivion's energy siphons, right? Exploding everything, causing mass carnage to the Martian fleet, blah, 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 blah. You know how it is. You've seen the clips that I'm talking about behind me here, right? Back in the Day, it's a song about how hard, fast, and loud they all used to rock back in the day. You know, more or less. Which I always found it interesting as the song itself, while being a really fast-paced metal song, it really does not sound anything like those old thrash classics. However, to me, it really sounds like a modern, well, at this time now it's 20 years old, but at the time it was modern, a modern reimagining of that new wave of British heavy metal sound. You know, like Iron Maiden, Saxon, Samson, Angel Witch, especially with that ending outro, you know, chanting section. Now that I think about it, this is probably the only Megadeth song that I can think of which features, you know, one of those oh sections. And honestly, I love the ending of the song. I think it's great. And the lyrics are just very catchy and very heartfelt. And, you know, the riff is cool and the chanting is cool. Yeah, it's just a really, really great song with a great ending outro section. I think it really works really well in the show. Metal's king back then and still is to this day. Others imitate or challenge, but it never goes away. These are lyrics which honestly still ring true to this day. Obviously, right, I have a whole YouTube channel about how old metal is just great and how you should appreciate it and how it's art and stuff like that. So thus, by playing the truly epic song about how metal came to be and how sick it was to be there back in the day and how metal still reigns and will always be king, Dave Mustaine saves the day. You know, Savior Dave. He destroys the Martian fleet, sends them packing, tails between their legs, back to Mars. Imagine this image here. Dave Mustaine, the savior of Earth. Well, that's the image that we get on Duck Dodgers here. Incredible. And it really, really makes Megadeth seem like a very huge and important band, which to me, and to you guys, they probably are, but I would also guess that this show would have been the first episode many kids had to the band and to metal in general. I wonder how many adults who maybe were Megadeth fans back in the day saw this episode and then picked up the newest Megadeth album, or maybe they'd never even heard Megadeth wefore, but liked the song and then went and bought something. You know, quality-wise aside, both The System Has Failed and United Abomination sold more than Risk and more than The World Needs a Hero, so who knows, right? It's really hard to say how big of an effect this show had on it, but it probably wasn't a negative effect, right? In fact, it probably was a net positive in general. Right, here I am talking about it 20 years later, you know what I mean? And so yeah, all in all, a pretty well done and well written episode. It seems the writers actually know and appreciate the band and the genre of music, which is always nice, as sometimes when you have metal mentioned or portrayed in movies or TV shows, it is just done so poorly and cringy and from someone who obviously doesn't know anything about it. But here it is very well done. You know, the jokes are pretty good. Even watching it back as an adult, I didn't find the whole thing too corny or kitschy and actually laughed out loud in a couple parts. So bravo to the Duck Dodgers team, and I guess a thank you. You know, I didn't go to and listen to Megadeth right after the episode, you know, I was only 10. But later on when I was a teenager and getting more into music, I distinctly remember being ecstatic and very happy and excited when I listened to The System Has Failed for the first time. And I got to back in the day and I was like, holy shit, this is the song from Duck Dodgers. Oh my god, it blew my mind that I had found it because I had no idea what the song was called, you know what I mean? And lastly, Dave Mustaine also features in the last episode of the series, where here he is seen clowning on Duck Dodgers, in which he says, quote, "Dodgers is the worst guitar player in existence. He should be behind bars. He's that bad. He's a punk. I really can't believe they made Dodgers captain. I'd be a better captain than him. I've got my own helmet here." End quote. And yeah, Dave Mustaine's voice acting was pretty good too, you know. I just think this is a very, very well done episode. So yeah, if there's anything else like this, you know, metal cameos in TV shows or movies, let me know. I would love to cover them. This could be a new series. So yeah, I've been Varvis, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers.